Welcome to History.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're stepping into a fascinating corner of literary history, alliterative verse. And trust me, this isn't just some dusky term from your high school English class.
It really isn't. What's captivating about alliterative verse is that this seemingly simple device can act as a bridge to this whole other world of mythology, culture, and even modern storytelling.
Okay, so we're not just talking about a few words that happen to start with the same letter here, right?
Not at all. Think of alliteration in this context as like the scaffolding for complex stories and traditions. It's fascinating.
All right, you've got me intrigued. We've got stacks of sources here. Wikipedia articles on alliterative verse, family trees of Norse gods, excerpts from Norse Mythology for smart people, and the 12 most important gods in Norse mythology. Where did we even begin with all of this?
Well, what these sources really reveal is how far-reaching this influence of alliterative verse really is. For instance, did you know that something as commonplace as the days of the week, like Thor's Day, which we know is Thursday, are early examples of alliterative structure rooted in Norse mythology?
Wow, I never made that connection before. It's like these echoes of the past are still present in our language today. Okay, so before we journey through time, let's make sure we're on the same page. What exactly is alliterative verse?
You're right, it's like traveling through time. The Wikipedia article defines alliterative verse as a form of verse that uses alliteration as the principal organizing device, unlike, say, the rhyming schemes we might be more familiar with. But it's more than just finding words that start with the same letter. In alliterative verse, that repetition of sounds creates like this driving rhythm, this powerful force that propels the story forward. It's really quite effective.
So it's about the feeling the alliteration creates, not just the technical side of it.
Precisely. And it's no coincidence that we find alliterative verse in early Germanic literature, think Beowulf or the Poetic Edda. These cultures shared a linguistic history, so alliteration would have felt natural, almost instinctive. It's like hearing whispers of a shared past in the very sounds of the language.
And speaking of those shared threads, our sources mention the Kalevala meter used in Finnish poetry. It also relies heavily on alliteration, right? Is there a connection there too?
It's a fascinating parallel. The Kalevala meter is ancient, and some scholars believe there might be a direct link back to those Germanic traditions. If true, it suggests a cultural exchange that traversed significant distances. Like, we're piecing together this ancient linguistic tapestry. To really understand the potential connection, though, we need to compare how each tradition utilizes alliteration, the specific rules they followed, and the overall effect they were going for. For example, the Germanic tradition often emphasizes this strong, driving rhythm, while the Kalevala meter leans towards a more chant-like flow.
So even within the world of alliteration, there are these subtle variations, these unique flavors depending on the culture and the time period.
Exactly. It's not a monolithic thing. Alliterative verse has its own fascinating history and evolution.
A history that we are about to dive into.
Indeed. Our sources lay out this captivating journey through time. Shall we begin with Old English?
Let's. I think we're ready to meet Beowulf.
Excellent. Old English is really where alliterative verse shines. Beowulf, with its strict adherence to alliteration, isn't just a great story, it's really a glimpse into the Anglo-Saxon world. Their values, their fears, their heroes.
And their monsters, don't forget those.
Yeah.
But we see this form in more than just epic adventures, right?
Absolutely. The fact that it appears in elegies, riddles, other forms of Old English poetry really emphasizes how deeply intertwined it was with their culture. Imagine their everyday conversations being infused with this rhythmic, almost musical quality.
It makes you wonder if that made the listening experience even more captivating for them. But alliterative verse didn't just stop with Old English, did it? Our sources point toward a so-called, quote, alliterative revival, which sounds a lot like alliterative verse had its own comeback tour.
A very apt comparison. During the Middle English period, works like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Piers Plowman thrust alliterative verse back into the limelight. And these weren't simple imitations. They were complex, sophisticated works that demonstrated just how versatile this, seemingly rigid form could be.
So they were pushing the boundaries of what alliterative verse could do. What makes the Middle English use distinct from the Old English period?
One notable difference is the density of the alliteration. Middle English alliterative poems often feature 3 or more alliterations per line, creating an even richer, more intricate tapestry of sound. Imagine the skill involved in weaving those complex patterns while still, maintaining a coherent narrative.
It sounds almost impossible. No wonder they call it a revival, right? They breathed new life into this ancient form. But I have to ask, was this purely an English phenomenon?
Yeah.
Did alliterative verse ever venture beyond the shores of England?
It absolutely did. Our sources, particularly Norse Mythology for Smart People and the Wikipedia article on Old Norse poetry, reveal this rich tradition of alliterative verse in Old Norse and Icelandic literature.
You know, when I think of those Norse myths, I think of epic battles, larger-than-life gods and monsters, tales of bravery and adventure. It seems like a perfect fit for alliterative verse, doesn't it?
It does. The two seem tailor-made for each other. Think about the sagas and the Poetic Edda, both brimming with vivid imagery and dramatic storytelling, all heightened by the power of alliteration.
We've mainly talked about Beowulf. Did Old Norse poetry stick to one specific form of alliterative verse?
What's fascinating about Old Norse poetry is its variety of verse forms. While they all used alliteration as a foundation, they weren't afraid to play with the structure, adding different elements to create unique rhythms and effects. Take, for example, Fornyrðislag, Jóhanata, and Drottfeit. Each one had its own set of rules dictating syllable count, stress patterns, and even incorporating rhyme and assonance to craft these really specific soundscapes. They were incredibly skilled.
And it wasn't just about the structure, right? These poets were masters of language, employing specialized vocabulary and kennings, which are essentially poetic metaphors, to further elevate their verse. And it's amazing how Icelandic, a language directly descended from Old Norse, has preserved these traditions for centuries. They even have Rímur poetry, which blends alliteration with rhyme. It makes you realize how this seemingly ancient form is still alive and evolving.
It truly is remarkable. And speaking of keeping traditions alive, prepare to be surprised. Alliterative verse experiences a revival in the modern era.
Oh, now that is a plot twist.
Wow.
All ears.
Yeah.
Who are these modern champions of alliteration?
Some names you might recognize. Our sources point to literary giants, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, as key figures in this modern revival. Both were captivated by medieval literature and made a conscious effort to incorporate alliterative verse into their writing.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. I could almost hear the echoes of Beowulf in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He really captured that epic, timeless feel with his use of language. But Tolkien and Lewis weren't alone, were they?
Not at all. Other notable figures like W.H. Auden, Ezra Pound, even Richard Wilbur experimented with alliterative verse in their works. It's a testament to the enduring power of this form, how it transcends time and continues to resonate with artists across generations.
It's incredible to think that a form rooted in such antiquity still speaks to us today. But it's more than just an interesting historical footnote, isn't it? What's the takeaway for our listeners? Why should they care about alliterative verse?
That's a great question. If we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, alliterative verse provides this unique lens through which we can understand how language shapes our understanding of the world. The repetition of sounds, the vivid imagery, the heightened drama, all these elements work in concert to create this powerful, memorable experience for the listener or reader, even today.
And it's not just an abstract concept, is it? Our sources, especially 10 Norse mythology facts and that pasted text document, highlight how much Norse mythology continues to captivate us. We see it everywhere, from Wagner's operas to Marvel's Thor, proving that these ancient, often alliterative stories still resonate with something deep within us. It's true. Those stories are everywhere these days. And it's not just the stories themselves, but like even specific concepts. Our pasted text source even mentions how musicians like Wagner, Elton John, even Led Zeppelin have all referenced Valhalla in their work. That's amazing to me, this ancient concept of fame and legacy still echoing in modern art forms.
It really is amazing to see. And what I find particularly fascinating is how these reinterpretations, even across like vastly different genres, reflect our evolving ideas about, say, masculinity.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. From the stoic, heroic Viking warrior to like the flawed and often funny Thor of the Marvel movies, we can trace how those archetypes are constantly being challenged and reimagined.
It's a great reminder that even these ancient myths aren't static, like set in stone. They're living stories that we as a culture continue to kind of reshape and reinterpret.
Absolutely.
And those reinterpretations can lead to some like really interesting conversations like the ones about evolving gender roles and what it means to be heroic today.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to why understanding alliterative verse is so important. By exploring this specific form, its history, and its cultural significance, we unlock like this deeper appreciation for the mechanics of language itself, how it shapes our perceptions and connects us to the past, present, future. future.
It's like a key that opens up this whole new level of understanding, not just in literature, but in all forms of storytelling.
Precisely. And this brings up a question for you, the listener. How does understanding the rhythm and structure of alliterative verse, even subconsciously, change how you experience language in your daily life? Do you start to pick up on those alliterative patterns in songs and poems, even in everyday conversations?
It's almost like this secret code embedded in the language we use every day. And once you become aware of it, it's like seeing the world with new eyes, hearing the world with new ears.
Exactly. So I encourage you to go out and explore the world of alliterative verse, whether it's delving into the epic poetry of Beowulf or noticing the subtle wordplay in, like, a modern song.
Pay attention to how the sound of the words enhances the meaning, evokes emotion, and creates that sense of rhythm and flow.
And don't be afraid to play with alliteration in your own speaking and writing. It's such a powerful tool that can add depth, texture, and memorability to your use of language.
Who knows, you might even spark a modern-day alliterative revival of your own. So until next time, keep your ears open, your minds curious, and as always, happy listening.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Welcome to History. Welcome To is dedicated to exploring new technology to create informative and entertaining media. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe for more. Leave a comment if you have an idea for an episode that we should start researching. Thank you for listening.